Hi friends, welcome to chapter 14, presenting visual aids. So in this brief presentation, we'll talk a little bit about the tips of using visual aids, different types of visual aids, and the effective and ineffective methods for presenting visual aids. So when we are giving a speech, similar to like what I'm doing right now, this lecture, we can use visual aids to really help the audience connect with the things that we're saying. So some of the advantages of using visual aids includes clarity. So visual depictions of complex topics often help with clarity. So this could be, having some sort of visual model for a theory or a concept or, a process, or it could be the visual depiction of data, or maybe even concepts like the relationship between ecological factors within our environment. It also enhances the level of interest. So we know that the visual sensory information often is more stimulating than auditory sensory information. So if you just only had a recording of me presenting the information without any visual aids, chances are that would be very boring. But because I have some sort of visual component, that may keep your interest. So we could use visual aids to keep the audience interested in our topic. It also, research has shown that when we activate a lot of different sensory channels in our learning. So having a multi-sensory channel, such as like reading, writing it down, taking notes as we read, that helps solidify the information as we learn it. So similarly, in our presentations, having some sort of visual component can actually increase retention rates at the end of our presentations. It could also benefit us in terms of the credibility. So, as humans, we often give a lot of weight to seeing, to the visual. So, seeing is believing. So, I could tell you that, yes, there was a 30% increase in sales this quarter in this company, right? And you're like, great, but when you see it, it has a more profound effect on the audience, and it gives credibility to what I'm saying to the audience. It also can help persuasiveness. So, having pictures, graphs, some sort of visual aid can be persuasive by connecting our message to the ethos, pathos, and logos in Aristotle's rhetorical theory. So let's go ahead and talk about the different types of visual aids we can use in our presentations. Well, we could use models or objects. This is actually bringing in a physical object or model into the space in which we are going to give a presentation. It could be maybe photos or drawings, so we could maybe embed these in a multimedia platform, such as what I'm doing now. Like I'll use some pictures and some drawings in this presentation. We could use graphs, charts. We could embed videos, or maybe, if I was giving this lecture live, I would probably show a video during my presentation to help illustrate the concepts for the audience. Sometimes as speakers, we are the visual aid. So we might not have, a PowerPoint or anything, but we actually might demonstrate to the audience some sort of technique. So a few semesters ago, I had a student who was a black belt in some sort of martial arts, and they asked a volunteer to come up during their presentation, and the speaker then became the visual aid as the speaker illustrated the different types of moves that we could use to protect ourselves from maybe someone attacking us. So the speaker, as the speaker, we could become a visual aid as well. And then, of course, using presentation technology or multimedia platforms such as PowerPoints, videos, audios, all of those things. So there's a lot of different types that we could do. So again, objects or models, we could bring in something into the environment in which we're given a speech. Keep in mind though that you want your models or the objects to be large enough so that everyone can see them, right? So if you're close to the audience, great. You can show that object, but for the people like in the back of an auditorium, they probably wouldn't be able to appreciate that visual aid because it's too small. We could bring in physical models or objects or things that contribute to our speech. So if you were going to give a speech on the importance of learning CPR, or maybe a demonstration speech on the different types of steps required to perform CPR effectively, then you might bring in a CPR dummy or some sort of model that you could demonstrate some of those practices on. I think the most common is pictures, and because most of us will be probably using some sort of uh, mediated multimedia technology to present our visual aids, chances are you're going to probably use pictures a lot. So here is an example, and this is the comparison between the human lungs, and healthy lungs versus unhealthy lungs due to smoking. So cancerous lungs. And so this is a very powerful picture because let's say I'm giving a speech on smoking or lung cancer or trying to persuade my audience to stop smoking, right? This could be a very powerful visual aid. Um, so when using pictures, there are a few guidelines. First, make sure that they are large enough so that the audience uh, can see. Um, Make sure they're not too busy. So what do we mean by not too busy? You don't want a lot of visual stuff happening in your presentations or visual aids because then the audience could get overstimulated and it's hard to focus our attention on the speaker and also the visual aid. So you want to keep it very simplistic, clean, and to the point, very relevant. So try to avoid busy pictures. Um, the cool thing is with embedding pictures into PowerPoints, you can usually adjust the size of them. The next thing that we could include as a visual aid are charts and graphs. So for example, this is a graph depicting the percentages of personal spending. So when using different graphs, some guidelines, again, keep them simple. So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand this graph. So it's very, very, very simplistic, easy to glance at it and appreciate that visual aid. When using graphs and stuff, you want to make sure that you label the variables um, in the graph if appropriate, or have some sort of source or explanation. Like just don't show us a graph or some sort of chart and not explain its relevance to the speech or the topic. Once again, we could use multimedia. This is PowerPoint video clips, audio recordings. You want to edit them down to about 15 seconds. So if you're using video clips in your presentation, try to keep them below 15 seconds because you don't want the video clip to monopolize your presentation. Be mindful of the room and the equipment that you have available to you. So as a speaker, you want to prepare in advance and make sure that the technology that you're going to be using does in fact work. And I think it's a great idea to always have a plan B in case the technology fails. For from my personal experiences teaching, some days you walk into a classroom and none of the technology works. And so instead of spending the whole, class period trying to figure out why it's not working, it's always good to have a plan B. So you don't want to be that speaker that, is relying solely on technology, and when it doesn't work, you can't give your speech. Handouts are another thing that we see in speech for the visual aids. They're a little bit less common, but an example of this would be pamphlets, let's say about a concept. Some of the guidelines when using pamphlets is you want to pass them out after the speech is finished, primarily because you don't want the audience to be distracted thumbing through that pamphlet while you're trying to deliver your speech. So it's always a good idea to pass them out at the end of your speech. Make sure they're clear and concise. Be mindful of how many copies to bring. The last thing you want to do is run out of copies for your audience. Create your own using pamphlets from outside sources. So there's a lot of websites and that you can use to create some very professional looking pamphlets. So let's go ahead and take a little bit deeper dive into some examples of good photos and bad photos in our presentation. So let's say I'm giving a speech on, hippos, hippopotamuses, right? Now, this is a really busy picture. You'll notice that it has writing. Some writing over here is too small to even read. And the writing is not, doesn't have strong contrast between the background colors. So this picture is pretty dark, has small font. It's unreadable, the message, and it doesn't communicate the purpose in heaven with hippos, right? Now, something like this would be more simple, it would be clean, and it's actually visually pleasing. So you want to use your pictures strategically. Here is another horrible example of a visual aid. Like, this is so busy. You have the background, this picture that almost bleeds into the background. You can't really read the font easily. So you want to stay away from things like this. I know it's tempting to get creative and to kind of show off that creativity through our visual aids, but really, it's best just to keep it simple because we do run the risk of distracting our audience members. We should also avoid just block text in our presentations. So you don't want to, you want to avoid something like this, where again, the color contrast is not great. It's hard to read, and you have this block of text. Now, the reason why is because I don't know about you, but I have a difficult time listening to someone and reading at the same time. And so by doing this, you're essentially forcing the audience to make a decision to either stop listening to your presentation and read what you put on the PowerPoint, or just to not even read what's on the PowerPoint and just continue listening to the speaker. In that case, your visual aid would be ineffective and pointless. So again, you don't want to put up the audience in that position where they have to make a choice between you or paying attention to the visual aid. So in order to do this, we can follow the 10, 20, 30 rule. And this is essentially some guidelines for developing PowerPoint presentations. So you want to keep your presentations below 10 slides, limit the presentation to under 20 minutes, and use at least 30-point font size. And so this font size that I used in this slide is above 30-point font. Now, typically the rest of my presentations, I try to keep it around 24 point font size. Sometimes that fluctuates depending on the information that I have on the PowerPoints. But again, there is keep in mind that there is a difference between, a speech, the speeches that we've been doing, and actually lecturing or instructing or trying to teach someone. So the mode of delivery tends to be a little bit different. So that's probably why you're thinking like, Colin, why are you not practicing what you preach? It's like, it's different. It's a different context. So, okay. I want to show you how you can structure a PowerPoint presentation, um, because when you show a visual, you don't want to keep it up for the whole duration of your speech, especially if you have multiple slides. So I'm going to run through this fictitious presentation on the cutest animals. So let's say I'm giving a presentation on the cutest animals. So I would start out with a blank slide, and this is where I would do my introduction. I would say something like, animals are cute, blah, blah, blah. I love animals. That's my credibility. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about 4 cute animals, right? The first one being koalas, right? And so then I could give a little bit of information about koala bears and then turn that visual off by switching to another blank slide. And then when I'm finished talking about koalas and what they eat and how they like to spend their free time, then I can go to penguins, and penguins are cute because blah, 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 blah. And then I can, give more information about that. And then we can talk about red pandas, which personally are my favorite animal. Like, look at that. That's so adorable, so cute and fluffy. I just want to give it a hug, right? So then after I'm done with that, I might switch to another blank slide and talk a little bit more about red pandas. And then, yeah, I was a Care Bear once, right? Maybe not the cutest animal. So this is how I'm going to show you behind the scenes. So in the PowerPoint presentation, all I did was just stagger these slides. So I had a blank slide followed by a visual aid, a blank slide followed by a visual aid. And so that way I can, change the visual aid simply by moving to the next slide. So that is, how I structured this brief presentation. You could do something similar as well, because sometimes we have different slides or different things that we're going to be touching on. Like maybe we use a visual aid just for our first main point, but our second and third main point, we decide not to use a visual aid. So by using some sort of presentational software like this, we can really strategize the best approach. So in this brief presentation, we talked a little bit about what not to do, right? We talked about tips for using visual aids, how they, help the audience with, clarity, retention, keeps things interesting. They could also add to the persuasive appeal of our presentation. Talked a little bit about some of the common types of visual aids, and of course some do's and don'ts. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.